Hello turtles! Welcome to another episode of Outside Game Dev. I'm Tim Baudet, and today I'm going to be talking about feature creep, how it stalks you, and on the way we're going to be taking a camping trip. I'll set up either my tent or hammock, stay the night, have a little campfire, and we're going to be talking about how feature creep can destroy your project, how you can detect it, and how to avoid it. I'm about 2 months away from finishing a project, and I think I'm going to add the small feature of some online multiplayer. What do you think? Feature creep? Absolutely. That's not a simple feature. It's one that should have been a core feature of your game if it was going to be in there. It's not something you add at the end as a quick little feature. That's a big ask. There's a lot of development that needs to go in to something like online multiplayer. Oh, check out this cool little bridge. It's a bunch of logs laid down to cover a mud hole that my dad had made a long time ago now. But what is feature creep and what is polishing? How to determine between the two? The way I look at it is polishing is usually fairly quick tasks. There are some that are longer, but they're not actually adding features to the game. They're just taking what's already there and juicing it up a little, adding some spice. Whereas feature creep is adding a bunch of content or features that weren't actually supposed to be in your game. Right? So you were developing your game, and as you're going, you're adding more and more features to it instead of the core idea that you came up with at the start. That's where feature creep comes in. Typically, all the core features of your game should be established and finished up by the prototyping and alpha dev phases of your project lifetime. And if you're still trying to develop more features after getting out of alpha, you're likely running into feature creep. You should probably say no to those features, leave them out of your game. It's likely it'll make it for a better game. It'll make your project scope a little smaller so that you can actually get to finish it. And it can also make it so you can keep the core idea a little simpler. You don't muddle it down with all kinds of other things. You might be asking, what if these other things make my game more fun? And it's kind of tricky. During the prototyping and alpha development phases, you really should have been able to figure out if you have enough value with what your idea is to actually get the game out and to the public. Is that what your audience is going to want? Or are they going to want more? Here, let's go take a break. So there's all kinds of different ways feature creep can come in. It's not always super obvious. It might even be that you're upgrading your tooling. Maybe Unity or your engine just released a new version and you're updating to that. Is there a reason for that? Other than being on the cutting edge, like, does one of the new features actually help your game? There's no real reason to upgrade your engine unless you're actually needing one of those features. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap, and it is feature creep in a different sense. Obviously, it's not adding a new feature or content to your game, but it is adding to the length of development. It's costing you time to upgrade your project and ensure it works with the engine, because sometimes APIs break or the input system changes or other things. Now, that's not to say never upgrade the engine or any of your tools, but to do so only if you're actually going to benefit from that upgrade. What are the consequences of feature creep to begin with? I've been hinting at a couple of them. It takes a lot longer for the project to be developed, so you are kind of going over scope and over budget, costs more, all that good stuff. But also, it kind of muddles the project a little bit. It's not as clear. When you have fewer features that are tighter knit together, it can actually provide more value to a player. One of the things I was really happy about with Turbo Boom's development was basically saying no to any feature that didn't fit. And it really made Turbo Boom a much more concise game that is delivering on the value that it set out for. This is almost the top of my parents' place. They have a little campfire pit that you saw me walk up to, and every now and then I've camped out back up here. I'm going to be setting up camp here and probably set up my tent, and it's a nice bed of moss. You see this? So let's get that set up, get some firewood collected, and have a little fire. It's pretty up here. I don't know how well the video is going to come out for me having a fire. Talking to you while I set up camp and go collect some firewood so that I can have a little bit of fire. Another good reason to avoid feature creep is project deadlines. That kind of ties into it's going to take a little bit longer and cost a little bit more, but you may have a deadline that you're trying to meet, and if you're always adding more and more features and more than what the core was, it's likely you're going to miss those deadlines. Let's go hunting through the woods for some dead firewood that we can use. This is going to be interesting because it's been raining almost non-stop. It didn't rain today or yesterday, so hopefully we'll be able to find some dry enough tinder up here to light a small fire. It's not going to be big, but collected some firewood, found some birch bark laying on the ground, used my ferro rod and knife to get the fire started, and it worked out pretty quick. I just got the fire going. We'll continue talking about the scary parts of feature creep. So my face is a little red from the fire, but so we got the fire going, and we've talked a little bit about what feature creep is and why it's kind of bad for you. How do you avoid it? We've already touched this a little bit with the project lifespan when I was just defining what feature creep is, trying to build a new feature that's outside of prototyping or alpha development. That's kind of how you start detecting it, but it's also how you combat it too. Say no to any features that are getting developed outside of your core idea. Just straight up say no to them. Unless they are really adding value and you know that it's like a must-have for your project, which really should have been defined earlier, but you know, you got to balance that. Make sure it's actually going to add the value that you're expecting. Don't just add it thinking it might add value. If it might add value, say no, straight up. Just that's kind of the problem with saying no to absolutely every feature, right? You're going to wind up saying no to things that might have added value. And as a business, you have to measure that. Like, well, what's going to work out? What's adding value to your project versus what's just muddling it up, and it's hard. I tend to lean on say no more often. So as a business, you have a limited timeline, and that's because you have a limited amount of resources that you can do, mostly in money, right? Like you don't have a runway that's going to last you forever, and you get the project out. The sooner you can do that, generally speaking, the less cost it's going to take to develop the project, and that's where feature creep is bad. It inflates that, as we kind of went over before. By saying no to any of the features that aren't going to add value, you keep it clean and concise, and you lower the amount of work you have to do. Sometimes it's content, right? Feature creep can be more than just features. It could be the content that you're adding. Maybe you're adding a new weapon, but it requires creating a whole new set for all of your classes or something. Yeah, you just gotta pay attention to all of that and say no more often than not. Error on the side of no. What if the project you're building isn't going to be fun without those additions? What if you feel like you need to add those additions for the project to be fun? Well, if you're outside of the prototyping phase, you probably should still be in the prototyping phase because you should have already answered this question. You should already have found the fun. And if you're endlessly chasing the fun, it's perhaps time to consider canceling the project. It's hard to think about that, but that's why I created this other video. Know when to cancel or discard a project and what to do in that situation. So go check out that. Thanks for joining me on Outside Game Dev as I went camping and talked about some feature creep. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with others, and leave a comment below. Ask a question. Maybe I'll answer it on a future episode. Until later, turtles, have a good one.